Any NASCAR fans here? No, you're at the races. But there's one particular fan named Colin that I think is definitely not here. So shout out to Colin if you're listening online. But we've been doing a series where we sit and we kind of break down a book of the Bible and go through things like the book of Luke. Am I on? No?
It doesn't sound like you're from over here.
Okay, I think they can figure that out. Remember, it's always the sound guy's fault. People are like pointing to my ear, and I'm thinking, am I hideously deformed? Probably. But normally we kind of land on a book of the Bible and teach through that. But we've been doing a series where we're kind of working on 3 words that we use here at Deepwater to describe who we are as a church. And so it's biblical because we're giving lots of scripture as to why we do things, but it's not quite, what we normally do. And this week we're landing on the word, we did gather. We talked about what it means to be a community that gathers together, what it means to be connected in that way, and then to grow. And there's always this overlap because I think one of the ways we grow is in relationships and community. So there is this overlap between the two. So we did gather for 2 weeks, we did grow for 2 weeks, and guess where we're going this week? Engage. They didn't see the other slide. So gather, grow, and this week, it's usually my fault because I delete the old one, but it is engage. And we're talking about, now, you probably don't read a lot of church growth literature and things like that, or a lot of church mission statements, maybe you do. But a lot of them, a lot of times when we look at these things, we think of, when we think of this last word, we're trying to think of three things to sort of describe things. We gather kind of made sense because community. Grow made sense because, we really should grow in our faith if we're believers. And then the third one, I think naturally I wanted to put service, but I think sometimes service, when you put that, it begins to mean you just want to serve in the church. Now, we do need people to serve in the church. We're glad we have people who do worship team. We're glad we have people who do sound. We're glad we have people who run the video camera. We're glad we have, all kinds of stuff. We're glad there's kids church right here. Like right now, there's somebody teaching kids church, teaching your kids. That's important. But service also means connecting and serving outside. And so I'm going to go into Luke chapter 5, which is going to be a familiar passage for a lot of you, and you might, some of you will recognize it when we get there. So in Luke chapter 5, it says this, starting at verse 1. One day Jesus was preaching on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. Great crowds pressed in on him to listen to the word of God. He noticed 2 empty boats at the water's edge, for the fishermen had left them and were washing their nets. Stepping into one of the boats, Jesus asked Simon, its owner, to push out into the water. So he sat in the boat and taught the crowds from there. And so they're in the Sea of Galilee. If you read the Bible, if you read the Gospels, you'll see this. It's not a sea in the sense of like Old Man by the Sea, like the ocean salty water, but it's basically a giant freshwater lake. It's also called Gennesaret, Sea of Tiberias. So if you're reading through and trying to get your biblical geography straight, now you know. It's 64 square miles. 141 feet deep. I was trying to find things. I'm always like trying to, how big is this in person? Because most of us aren't there, aren't going to get to go there. Corporate city limits of Dover is 23 square miles. If I looked it up right. And that, for those who are for other places, Galveston Island in Texas is about 64 square miles. Staten Island, New York is 59 square miles. So it'd be like the size of Staten Island. That doesn't help most of us. I tried to do like local, like Wyoming, but Wyoming's like 1 square mile. So it would be like 64 Wyomings. Anyway, it says, so he goes out in the water. Now, this is really acoustics. A lot of times, he kind of, by getting in the boat, he's kind of keeping the crowd at bay because, when Jesus taught, crowds gathered. And then sort of the water creates a natural acoustic thing. We live on a lake, as some of you know, and we can listen to the Caesar Rodney Band when they're playing on the field because it kind of cuts through Brecknock, hits the lake, shoots all the way. So we're like a ways away, and we can hear. It's sort of this natural acoustic thing. I remember, actually, it's funny, here I can't always tell my mic's on, like when you guys couldn't hear it quite right. I can't always tell. There's a whole other church over here, for those of you who don't know. We even forgot to turn on the mic, I think, for the first couple of weeks in this building because the acoustics are better than our last space. And so, he's out there, he's teaching, and it says this. It says, when Jesus had finished speaking, he said to Simon, now get out where it is deeper and let down your nets to catch some fish. And now the NIV 1984 version says, when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch. Now, that would be a great name for a church. That'll come back in later. Some of you will get that. But he says, go out into deep water. So verse 5 says, Master, Simon replied, we worked hard all last night and didn't catch a thing. But if you say so, I'll let the nets down again. I think sometimes when we look at biblical characters, we think they had it all together. They instantly maybe did things, or and the way I read this, I think Peter was probably a little skeptical. He'd been sitting there washing the nets, listening to Jesus. He doesn't mind lending him his boat because hey, he likes what this rabbi's teaching. But Peter was a fisherman. He knew fishing. And they'd fished at night because that was usually a better time to catch fish. And I picture him being a little reluctant. Now, again, I live on a lake, and it's funny when you see people come out on their boats and different things, and there's different lures they'll use, and there's different places they'll try to fish and stuff. And I kind of laugh. And honestly, the funny thing is, you can use your old Christmas trees to create fish habitat, and I sometimes create some fish habitat, so the fishing is really good by me. But no, it's a good thing though. It's good for the fish. But it's funny sometimes because the guys in the boats, they don't really know where everything is, so they're sometimes not fishing in the best spot. So I know that lake. So it would be funny to have one of the guys, and it's really weird when you live next to a lake. Those of you who've ever done it, it's like suddenly there's a shirtless guy drinking beer in your yard, and then you realize they're on a boat. So I'm like studying, reading, working. Oh wait, this is just a guy in a boat. But when somebody's there fishing, I would tend to think I know the lake better than them. That I kind of know what I do. Especially here comes a rabbi. So here's the carpenter. Jesus was a carpenter. Carpenters come and tell the fishermen how to fish. And I'm sure Peter was a little bit come on. It'd be like someone coming to tell you how to do your job. I don't know what all of you do. Well, I probably could. But, if you are a server admin, if you deal with computers, it would be like somebody coming in off the street telling you how to, I think your firewalls need to be changed. Or, if you're a physical therapist, they're like, oh, I saw a YouTube video. I know a better way to do therapy than you. If military or weapons specialist, you know your job. And so, so here comes, these people, they Jesus is saying, hey, I got this better way to do that. And so I think Peter's a little doubtful, but out of respect, even though he's reluctant, he kind of does what he says. He says, this time, the nets, and so it says, Master, I worked all night and didn't catch anything, but if you say so, I'll let the nets down again. And so they do this. It says, this time the nets were so full of fish, they began to tear. A shout for help brought their partners in the other boat, and soon both boats were filled with fish and on the verge of sinking. And you can imagine, you fished all night, get nothing. Now, I've caught a lot of fish before. I've never caught so many. Now you'd probably think I'd tell the story that I did, but I've never caught so many fish that I'm thinking the boat might sink. Now, if some of you maybe haven't, maybe have. You ever been down the inlet when the blues are running? Like it's an amazing thing. There's fish there. I remember one time my brother called me. He's like, blues are running. Want to go? And I had like 30 seconds to decide if I was going to go fishing, and the answer was yes. At the time we had a boat, and we went down, and I mean it was. Every time you threw your line in, you just started reeling in because you were catching them. And then we ran out of room in our cooler, so we were just filling the boat with bluefish everywhere. One fish, red fish, two fish, blue fish. No, but it was that was a lot of fish, but it wasn't so many fish that I was, scared the boat was going to sink and had to call over another boat. So it's this miraculous catch. And it says, when Simon Peter realized what had happened, he fell to his knees before Jesus and said, "Oh Lord, please leave me. I'm such a sinful man." For he was awestruck by the number of fish they had caught, as were the others with him. His partners, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, were also amazed. "Oh Lord, please leave me. I'm a sinful man." For me, it's kind of surprising. Because I'm like, you're a fisherman? I'd be like, hey, can you show me how to do that? Because I like this trick. I could be a very rich man. The Message version, which is, we usually read from the New Living Translation because it's an easy translation to read. I like the way they translate a lot of things. But the Message says it this way that I like. It says, "Master, leave. I'm a sinner and can't handle this holiness. Leave me to myself." And so that's this as Jesus, reveals himself because of what Peter does. Peter has this realization of who Jesus is, and so his first reaction is like, "Hey, I'm not worthy." Now I'm picturing Wayne's World. So, but that I can't even be around you, and so. But Jesus replies to Simon. I know sometimes it's Simon, Peter, Simon. It's both. I know sometimes you get confused, or like Simon and Peter are the same dude. Yes. But it says, Jesus replied to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you'll be fishing for people." And as soon as they landed, they left everything and followed Jesus. And so he gets this new job. Now, I remember, and some of you have heard this story. It was funny because Seth and I were actually talking, and he's like, "Why is deep water called deep water?" And I was laughing because I'm like, "Yeah, we're actually going to talk about that." A few years ago, it's been a while now, but I was reading through the scriptures, which is kind of a habit that's just good to help you grow. And so I was reading the book of Luke, and some of you know I have a slight affinity for the book of Luke. I really enjoy it. I've read it, I don't know how many times. I was talking to one time about it. I was like, "Yeah, I've been studying Luke for 3 years," and they're like, "Surely you read faster than that." But there was just a lot of good stuff in it. And so I was reading through the book of Luke, and I came across this passage, and I'm reading it, where Jesus says, "Go out into deep water." And again, I was reading the 1984 NIV because the 2011 NIV wasn't out by then. So you were like Bible translation nuts. And so I was reading that, and it really struck me. And I've got a little journal that sometimes I write down kind of questions in, like, what's going on there? And I wrote down this little question, and what does he mean by deep water? And so I happened to be doing some academic work at the time, and I was, in those days, you had to go to the library because not everything was digital. So I searched all of my library, which I have several books for those of you who've been in my office, and then I have even more digital books. I searched through all those, and I couldn't really find the answer I wanted. And so I was in an academic library, and I'm going through all this stuff. I'm reading journal articles, I'm searching, and I'm like trying to figure out, what is this? What is deep water? And a lot of the things I read, honestly, were like hokey kind of, I think you're totally missing the point. And it's like people trying to make some connection. A lot of times, books just kind of glossed over why deep water. And I finally came to this as a conclusion. Why did he send them out into deep water? Because that's where the fish were. And not a great revelation, but maybe so, I just thought, hey, that's where the fish are. And so, why did he call them? Because that's where the fish were. And then it was, those words kind of got me on a journey asking myself, God, where are you sending me? Where are you sending me? Where the fish are? Where is my deep water? And then it was interesting because a few years later, a little while later, we're naming this church, and we got to thinking, it's so hard to name a church. Like, it really is, because like all the good names are taken, right? Now you're trying to find something because you want to be able to buy a website domain, and you can't choose something real basic because everyone's got that. And, it seems so, and it's like when you name your kids. Like, anyone struggle with naming their kids? You think about things. There's a lot of meaning for why we named Joshua, why we named Eliana. We really wanted it to mean something. We're kind of working through it. Everything. I remember this one moment we were actually sitting in our kitchen, and Denise and I were talking, and we're like, what about deep water? And it's, now it sounds like a normal name for those of you who go here, but when we were naming it, it sounded a little weird. We're like, okay, we even kind of asked people, what do you think of, would you go to a church called Deep Water? And people are like, oh, are you in deep water? No. and then it's like, are you drilling for oil in the Gulf? No, anyway, that's a whole other thing. Really, the reason we named it that, and the reason, we do church the way we do, is because we want to be a church that goes where the fish are. We want to be a church that goes where people are. We want to be a church that doesn't just kind of gather together, which is good. Remember, gather, good. Not just, grow in your faith, but then get out there and do something. Get out there, be in the community. And so it's this reminder that we always want to be in the community. Now, 2 weeks ago, we talked about Matthew 28. And this is a famous passage called the Great Commission. Jesus said, Jesus came and told the disciples, I have been given all authority in heaven and on earth, therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you, and be sure of this, I am with you always, even till the end of the age. Now, if you remember from 2 weeks ago, when we hear this passage, most of us who grew up in church, or you grew up hearing this Great Commission, or, my first few years as a believer, I'd go to churches, they'd preach this passage, and they always said, go, right? Okay, as I mentioned, that's, if you look at the Greek, because that's, the New Testament's written in Greek, the only command in here is to make disciples. It's not to go. But there is this assumption that we will go. It's not a command. It's a participle, which has to do with, those of you who like grammar and stuff. I got in a discussion with the girl. I was at the store the other day, and the girl had, Team Oxford comma, and I got in a discussion with her over the Oxford comma. I told her I was going to use another cashier, and she was like, you've got to be kidding me. I'm not even sure she knew. She just had the Oxford. Some of you have no idea what I'm talking about when I'm talking the Oxford. Anyway, those of you who also like language, but, okay, Great Commission, one thing is make disciples. And that's why we teach as a church. That's why we go through, and do life together, is because ultimately we want to be disciples, but we also do need to go. And I want to get to that in John 17, starting verse 13. It says, now I am coming to you. This is Jesus speaking. I told them many things while I was with them in this world, so they will be filled with joy. I have given them your word, and the world hates them because they do not belong to the world, just as I do not belong to the world. I'm not asking you to take them out of the world, but to keep them safe from the evil one. They do not belong to this world any more than I do. Make them holy by your truth. Teach them your word, which is truth. And then verse 18, just as you sent me into the world, I am sending them into the world. Jesus, if you know your Christology, if you know who Jesus is, Jesus, exists before all time. He comes into the earth. He wraps himself in flesh, becomes human, so that he could point us and bring us back to God, so that we can have this relationship with God. And so just as he comes into the world, he sends us out into the world. We're not out of the world, but out into the world. And a lot of believers, when you get together, you start doing church, they kind of don't want to be polluted by the church, so they kind of become this holy huddle. We don't want to be polluted, so we never go outside. You'll never, get dirty if you never go outside, but you're not much good. We're created, and we talked about this with a classic car. Some of I love classic cars. Some people spend a ton of money and a ton of time rebuilding a car that they never drive. Like Ferris Bueller, remember the car and it doesn't get driven. That, to me, that's a horrible, horrible thing. If you take the time and money to rebuild a car, you want to drive it, right? You don't want to, you want to get in that 66 Mustang and drive it. And so, as people who are remade in the image of Christ, we are made to go. We are made to interact. We are made to engage other people. And ultimately, we're made to make the world a better place. Jeremiah 29. See, you want to say 11, but it's 7 I'm going to read. I threw you off. Jeremiah 29:7. Guys, I totally set you up for that one. Set, Spike. Jeremiah 29:7 says this, and work for the peace and prosperity of the city where I send you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, for its welfare will determine your welfare. Pray for the peace, the Hebrew word there's the shalom, the wellness, the well-being. And so our job is always, it was the job the Jewish people had, it was the job we have, is to make the place better. If Christians move into the neighborhood, it should look better. If we're a part of this community, it should look better. If we go and we're, at the gym, it should be better. If we go, anywhere we go, wherever we live, wherever we work, should be better. We should work to the peace, the well-being of those things. Now, James 2, we're going to actually get to this probably this week in the Bible study. It says, James chapter 2, some of the men we do a men's Bible study. There are burritos. I'm just telling you, there are burritos, they're tasty, but that's not the best part. The best part is getting together and studying the Word together. And we also have a bike ride after that, so after we're powered up by sausage, we ride. That first mile or two is a little slow because we're like, oh. But we got energy for the ride. Anyway, but some of us, we get together and study on Saturdays, and we're working through the book of James right now. But James chapter 2 says this during verse 14. What good is it, dear brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith but don't show it by your actions? Can that kind of faith save anyone? Suppose you see a brother or sister who has no food or clothing, and you say, goodbye and have a good day, stay warm and eat well. But then you don't give that person any food or clothing. What good does that do? You see, faith by itself isn't enough. Unless it produces good deeds, it is dead and useless. Now, someone may argue, some people have faith, others have good deeds. But I say, how can you show me your faith if you don't have good deeds? I will show you my faith by my good deeds. You say you have faith, for if you believe there is one God, good for you. Even the demons believe this, and they tremble in terror. How foolish. Can't you see that faith without good deeds is useless? Now, if you're a theologian, you will write lots of books about this. And I still remember going to seminary and, even some well-meaning professors, sort of, they kind of go, well, is this contrary to Paul? And we talk a lot about the grace of God here, right? That we're made right with God purely based on his, love for us, his act. And so when we put our faith and trust in him, it's not by what we do. We're made right with God by who he is and his actions to us. But faith that if you have a saving faith in Jesus, if you have, this salvation experience where you've put your faith and trust in Jesus, it changes then the way we live. You don't live the same way. A lot of times people use faith as sort of this. I have faith. It's just an excuse not to do anything. But information, the gospel plus application is transformation. We're not made right with God by anything we do, but faith in God, faith in Jesus, will change and cause us to do something. Now, let me illustrate this. I believe in George Washington. Do you believe in George Washington? Do you believe he existed? There's probably some conspiracy theorist here who's in a Facebook group. I mean, we have people who believe the earth is flat. So, you can believe anything on the internet. And there's always a very, appealing video with it. But, okay, I believe in George Washington, but I am not out chopping down cherry trees. I'm not crossing the Delaware. I'm not attacking the British. They got enough problems with Brexit going on right now. Anyway, but because I believe, but it doesn't make a huge difference in my life. I do like to collect Washingtons. That's my paycheck's on the Washington level. Some of you on the bigger bills. But but faith in Jesus changes how I live. That's a different way, that's a different understanding of what it means to believe. Because I believe in Jesus, some of you are much better off. Because I'd be driving, I'd be throwing golf balls at your car or something the way some of you drive. I'm a different person because I'm a follower and believer of Jesus. And some of you knew me before, and some of you have just known me after. I said this week, I was actually used to be a model. Most people don't realize. I was the before. Anyway. That was this week. But there's this change in who I am because I believe. Now, a lot of us have more of like what I'd call an unemployed faith. We believe, but it doesn't really, we're not doing anything with it. You have great skills and knowledge. You can know a lot about the Bible. Now, and I love Bible study. Don't get me wrong. I am like geeky out, I love the smell of musty books. I don't know this next generation because everything's so digital. I don't know if you ever get. I love the smell of a musty Kindle. I don't know what they're going to get. I'm an academic guy. I love it. I teach. I enjoy it. but knowledge is great, but knowledge needs to transform and change the way we live. I occasionally have talked to you about struggles I have with certain feelings when driving. Any of you who drive understand that. But I don't throw golf balls at cars. Some of you are wearing, I got that. That's another story. But, I don't, act and behave in certain ways because Jesus has changed my heart. It affects the way I do things. Now, faith should change the way we live. It's two natural things together. It's like peanut butter and jelly. They go well together. It's chocolate and peanut butter and pizza and cheese. Because those of you who eat pizza without cheese, that's weird unless you have an allergy. It's like eggs and scrapple. Some of you are like, I lost you there with the scrapple. But syrup and pancakes. It's this natural thing that goes together. There's this natural way that we live because of faith. We live differently because of this faith and trust we have. I was thinking of another analogy. It's kind of like being a fan versus a player. Now, some of us, have jerseys. Sorry, I'm going to pick on you, Sean, because you're standing there and you're sitting there and you're wearing a jersey. You guys playing today? But are you playing today? No. Just checking. But wearing a football jersey, but he's not on the team, right? Like he's a fan, and that's okay. I'm a football fan. I like football, but there's a difference between being a fan and a player. You can get the gear, but he doesn't get to play. And when faith in Jesus means we're more than fans. It doesn't mean we just put on the Team Jesus shirt. Now, there are literally Team Jesus shirts. We talk about Team Jesus in here, because we're not the only church in town. There's other great churches, other great, congregations following Jesus. So we always talk about, hey, we're Team Jesus. But then I found out there's a group that go around and call themselves doing Team Jesus. So I'm like, can I still use the Team Jesus thing? And then there's like printing shirts, Team Jesus. So it's getting very confusing. So I'm not talking about, but you can get the Team Jesus T-shirt. You can buy a Deep Water T-shirt. You can buy a T-shirt from another place, another congregation. But, there's a difference in wearing the shirt and doing the stuff. As believers and followers of Jesus, we need to not just buy the gear, we need to play the game. It doesn't mean we're perfect. It doesn't mean we're, maybe some of us are second string, third string. but we strive to become better followers of Jesus and do the things he did. We're not just watching the game, we get to be in on the game. And ultimately, we're made to change the world. We're made to change things different. It's sort of, you kind of have to start small. I remember when the kids were little at the pool, and I remember it was Kent Swim Club in our day. Now it's part of the Y. But I remember, I remember being there, which is weird because I have a lot of memories from childhood. But I remember being in the little kiddie pool when I was a kid, and then it was like at some point, my kids were in the little kiddie pool, and then they kind of like graduate over to, they can be in the shallow end, but you can't cross the line at the deep end. But then you get swept in there anyway, which that's a whole other thing. I was a lifeguard one time, and I was like, always trying to keep the kids in the right side of the pool. there's the shallow end, the deep end, and eventually, they're going off the diving board. And Kent Swim Club actually used to have a diving board. Anyone remember those? There were these boards that stuck out over the water, and we jumped on them. I know with insurance, I don't think anybody has them anymore. But it would be child abuse for me to take my little kids and chuck them off the diving board, right? That's how you learned in your day. Child services gets called today. It's changed a little bit. You can't do that anymore. If any of you were thinking about that with your babies, please don't. Or I'll dial 911 and then wait for you. But it's we get to change in time. Now we were at the gym because we like to pick things up and put things down. And it was a proud day yesterday when my son miscalculated the weight and put on a lot more weight and actually pushed it up off his chest. But if I put so we had 275 on there yesterday. If I took 275 and dropped it on a toddler, that's child abuse. So now, the reason I'm saying this is this. Yeah. We're getting off the tangent, I know, I'm the tangent man, it's tangent, actually tangent curve this way for you. Some of you get the math joke, some of you don't. But, here's the thing. We're made to engage the world. For some of us, we're just going to have to start small, though. Like if you've never done anything to serve people outside of yourself because of your faith, I encourage you to get started on the small things. We eat food for the homeless here, twice a week. So if you have off during the weekday, you come in, maybe microwave some sandwiches. You're kind of working towards that. I wouldn't recommend, or maybe we fed people at Salvation Army this week, and so people come together. We make some food. We feed some people who are hungry, and just love on some people because of Jesus. And there's little steps you can make. I wouldn't probably go out after this sermon and start like a brand new homeless ministry. Well, you could, though, if that's what you're feeling called to. But it's little steps. And I think sometimes because the steps seem so big, we don't make little changes in little ways to reach and to serve people. And so engaging people starts with little steps. But I think the question we really have to ask, because this is really the same question I was asking myself, is, where is your deep water? Now, we know where the church is actually meeting right now. We're in Wyoming. We're here, in case you didn't know it. I should have worn my Google shirt. We are here. But where is it that God's calling you to let down your nets? Where is God calling you to fish? Even if you're hesitant like Peter, ultimately, we're called to do that. Now, for some of us, that's going to be, to start, family or home. You can be a witness where you are, with whom you live, by how you live. Sometimes the people who know us best are our family, and sometimes they're the people who have the hardest time accepting the change. Because I'm sure people I grew up with, they're like, Jeff's different now. It's a change for him. But especially, family can be kind of, what do you mean you're this Jesus follower now? Like, how long is this thing going to last? But that's sometimes, who sees the most change. But because I live differently because of that. I treat my wife differently because I'm a follower of Jesus. I parent my kids differently because I'm a follower of Jesus. And so we serve outside of, we serve in our home. I think we engage here at Deepwater. We do need volunteers. We make sound guy jokes all the time because we blame the sound guy for everything. Even he's not in charge of the screens. We still blame the sound guy because it's just fun. I mean, if you didn't like the sermon this week, sound guy. It was his fault. If you don't like the coffee afterwards, sound guy. It's his fault. Even if the sound guy's a girl, it's the sound guy. No. Spirit didn't move in your life this week? Sound guy. No, but we need people. Right now, There are people, people who, did music. Right now, there's people, like there's someone teaching kids church. Right now, there's people running a nursery. These are all things we need, and there's things we need throughout the week. You should be very thankful for the guy who fixed the HVAC system while you were here worshiping today, because now it's heated up a little bit better than it was before. Although some of you are still wearing coats, I apologize. Which I like it cold though, so maybe we'll just do this every week. We'll save on heating money. A couple of us who like it chilly. Anyway, but it's not my intention to run a volunteer drive. That'll be next week. But here's the, we can help you get started in ways to serve. We're made to serve. I think some of us naturally serve. Like we get involved, we do things. Some of us are a little more reluctant, but we're made to serve. And some of the best growth I've had as a believer and a follower is serving, whether it's in the church or outside of the church. And then we're supposed to engage in the community of the world. Now, and this is where I slightly nuance the word, and that's why I don't like serve as much as the word. That's why we use engage, because I think there is the church service, there is serving people, but I think it also means that we go outside and do things. Some people coach, baseball, soccer, or wrestling. That's engaging the world. I have people who still call me Coach Dyer. I coached them in the early 2000s. I run into them around town, and it's like it's kind of weird because now they're like parents and everything now. That's like a whole nother thing. But I had influence on those kids while I was there. They knew I was a believer and a follower of Jesus, and that matters. And the way we lead at Cub Scouts or Girl Scouts, the way we feed hungry people. It's funny because we deliver Wawa sandwiches generally to the homeless. For a while, everyone started thinking I worked at Wawa. I remember I was downtown one time, this girl's like, the Wawa guy, and then I'm down there like, Wawa guy. I'm like, yeah, but it's this church that loves you and heats sandwiches, and other people heated it. I'm just dropping it off even, just to let you know. This is a Jesus thing. Don't work for Wawa, although I'm sure it's a fine place to work and great careers. No, some of you are shaking. But anyway, we're Team Rural Farms, Team Rofo. Anyway, you guys can argue about that later, along with politics. But, point being, we do what we do in the name of Jesus. And so as a church, we always want to be about that. I think the best compliment I ever got about the church one time was someone said, you certainly are an outwardly focused church. And I didn't know if that was meant to be good or bad at the moment, but I took it as good. Because I think over time, churches tend to think about just what's here. Now, I love you guys. I pray for you guys. I like you guys. Invite you to Dunkin' Donuts later. You guys bring me candy corn. Thank you. I know some people don't like candy corn. We have to have a what does it mean when you kick someone out? Discommunion, excommunication, yeah. No, I'm kidding. We'll keep you. We tolerate even those who don't like candy corn. Dana's not here. She would be picking on the candy corn too. She's slightly vocal about not liking it. But here's the thing. We're supposed to be in the world inviting people into this relationship with Jesus, not just kind of gathering together for ourselves. And so that also means inviting people here. Now, it was interesting because you look at different statistics, different places, it's different numbers. I was looking at one recently. And among the unchurched, 55% said they would attend church if invited by a family member, and 51% would attend church if invited by a friend or neighbor. That's like half. So if you ask somebody and they said no, just ask the next person. Statistically, they're coming. Maybe not because of how statistics work, but that's a whole nother. But, people will come if we invite them. And that's one of the ways we share who Jesus is. We engage them, and we bring people back to come to learn about who Jesus is. Now, it's interesting. Gospel conversation. So, talk about Jesus, talk about faith. And I know there's when you work someplace, there's rules, there's times. I realize that you can't. I had a friend who was always complaining about how their employer persecuted for their faith, and they just constantly posted on Facebook during work time. And I'm thinking, the problem is not your faith. The problem is you need to be working, not posting. Anyway. And another thing, don't post publicly that your employer is persecuting, because they can read your Facebook post. I'm just saying, be smart. Get a fake profile. No, please don't do that. But here, nearly half, 47%, would interact freely in a conversation about the gospel. Nearly another third, 31%, would actively listen without participating. They're kind of like, not really going to participate in the conversation, but I'm interested in your faith. So that's nearly 80%, 8 in 10 people would welcome a gospel conversation. Now, there's another 12% would discuss with discomfort, 11% would change the subject as soon as possible. And you know that. Some people, it's like they will quickly, you bring anything about faith up, 11% going to change the conversation. That's okay too. But this is the reality of the world we live in. But point being, majority of people would actually welcome conversation about faith. And again, don't be a jerk with how you present things. Don't be don't be inappropriately timed. When you need to be doing your work, be doing your work. Like when we, I make my kids stack wood a lot because I like to cut and split wood and heat the house with wood. And they will tell you they stack a lot of wood, but it makes them strong, like bull. It's like we talk when we're doing wood. But if you stop moving wood while you're talking, my rule is you're not allowed to talk. Because you could talk to me all day long while we stack wood, but if you can't talk while you stack wood, it doesn't do us any good. And it's the same with work. Don't have those gospel conversations, but we need to make sure we're being good employees too. So throwing that out there for some of you. Not that I'm saying you need it, but here's the thing: home, at church, in the world, we're needed in all three places. And we should engage people. And then ultimately, God gives us the Holy Spirit to enable us and empower us to do those things, but we have to be willing to do it. We have to be willing to have those conversations. And so just leave me with a couple of questions. Who is God calling you to reach? Where do you need to engage? How is He calling you to engage the world around you? As the worship team comes back to play, and we have connection cards there in the pew. We have one online too. Would love to pray for you this week. If you fill that out, if you want me to